Welcome everyone to Mom Kids class. Our lesson this time is about the Code of Ethics. And Code of Ethics is a guide of principles designed to help professionals conduct business honestly and with integrity. A Code of Ethics document may outline the mission and values of the business or organization, how professionals are supposed to approach problems, the ethical principles based on the organization's core values, and the standards to which the professional is held. One important trait that us journalists should have is self-regulation. Behaviorally, self-regulation is the ability to act in your long-term best interest, consistent with your deepest values. More so, it is the ability to monitor and manage your energy states, emotions, thoughts, and behaviors in ways that are acceptable and produce positive results such as well-being, loving relationship, and learning. A good journalist adheres to the Code of Ethics of journalists. The Code of Ethics contributes to the accuracy, fairness, and reliability of information, therefore benefiting the general public as consumers of information. Now, let us talk about the Code of Ethics as adopted by the National Union of Journalists of the Philippines. First, it states that a journalist shall scrupulously report and interpret the news, taking care to not suppress essential facts nor to distort the truth by improper omission or emphasis. It means that a journalist should not remove some details in the news in order to distort the information or to change the information. And a journalist should recognize the duty to air the other side and the duty to correct substantive errors promptly. Number 2 of the Code of Ethics states that a journalist shall not violate confidential information or material given to them in the exercise of their calling. And third, a journalist shall resort only to fair and honest methods in her or his effort to obtain the news, photographs, and/or documents, and shall properly identify himself or herself as a representative of the press when obtaining any personal interview intended for publication. Number 4 of the Code of Ethics is that a journalist shall refrain from writing reports which will adversely affect a private reputation unless the public interest justifies it. At the same time, he or she shall fight vigorously for access to information. Number 5 of the Code of Ethics is that a journalist shall not let personal motives or interest influence him or her in the performance of his or her duties, nor shall he or she accept or offer any present, gift, or other considerations of a nature which may cast doubt on his or her professional integrity. Sixth is that a journalist shall not commit any act of plagiarism. It means he should not get the work of other people and consider it as his or her own. Number 7. A journalist shall not in any manner ridicule, cast aspersions on, or degrade any person by reason of sex, creed, religious belief, political conviction, cultural or ethnic origin. Number 8. A journalist shall presume persons accused of crime to be innocent until proven otherwise. Number 9. A journalist shall not take unfair advantage of a fellow journalist. And number 10. He or she shall accept only such tasks as are compatible with the integrity and the dignity of his or her profession, invoking the conscience clause when duties imposed on him or her conflict with the voice of his or her conscience. Number 11 of the Code of Ethics is a journalist shall conduct himself or herself in public or while performing his or her duties as a journalist in such manner as to maintain the dignity of his or her profession. When in doubt, decency should be his or her watchword. Let us continue with some malpractices and violations of the Code of Ethics of journalists communicators in the Philippine setting. First, spread of fake news or false information in various social media platforms. Fake news or false information is news, stories, or hoaxes created to deliberately misinform or deceive readers. Usually, these stories are created to either influence people's views, push a political agenda, or cause confusion, and can often be a profitable business for online publishers. False information can deceive people by looking like trusted websites or using similar names and web addresses to reputable news organizations. Second of the malpractices and violations are defamation, libel, and slander. The term defamation is an all-encompassing term that covers any statement that hurts someone's reputation, also called defamation of character. If the statement is made in writing and published, the defamation is called libel. If the hurtful statement is spoken, the statement is slander. Defamation is considered to be a civil wrong. A person that has suffered a defamatory statement may sue the person that made the statement under defamation law, which would be called defamation case. Third is cyber libel. The elements of libel are the allegation of a discreditable act or condition concerning another, publication of the charge, identity of the person defamed, and existence of malice. It becomes cyber libel when committed through information and communication technologies. Fourth is plagiarism. It means to steal and pass off the ideas or words of another as one's own, to use another's production without crediting the source, to commit literally theft, to present as new and an original idea or product derived from an existing source. Number 5 of the malpractices and violations is the use of insensitive, discriminatory, and hate speeches. The term hate speech is understood as any kind of communication in speech, writing, or behavior that attacks or uses discriminatory language with reference to a person or a group on the basis of who they are. In other words, based on their religion, ethnicity, nationality, race, color, descent, gender, or other identity factor. This is often rooted in and generates intolerance and hatred, and in certain contexts can be demeaning and divisive. Number 6. ACDC, or attack, collect, defend, and collect. A kind of journalism where the reporter attacks a person in order to collect money from that person's rival or enemy. The same journalist then defends the person originally attacked, also for a fee. Number 7 of the malpractices and violations is ATM journalism. This refers to a practice in which reporters receive discrete and regular payoffs through their ATM accounts. News sources simply deposit cash into these accounts instead of handing the money over to journalists through envelopes. Number 8 is blood money. This is a payoff before publication to ensure that a story or a critical article is killed or else slanted to favor whoever is paying. My dear students, we are finished with lesson 5, and if you have questions, please feel free to write your questions in the chat box so I can answer that later. And now, since we are finished with lesson 5, we are going to proceed to lesson 6. I hope you are excited as I am to discuss lesson 6, and this is the clientele and audiences in communication. You may have seen different kinds of public speakers as you expose yourself in different situations. They may be your parents talking to you or to other people, your teachers in your school discussing a lesson, your favorite bloggers in their YouTube channels, your classmates presenting a group report in your class, a politician making a statement in national TV, and the likes. These communicators speak of specific topics to their listeners, viewers with different intentions. Furthermore, some of them may have the knowledge of their listeners or viewers, but some of them may have nothing at all in their minds. How can we make sure the success of their reports or speeches? In this part of the lesson, you will be introduced to various characteristics of clientele and audiences of communication, because knowing your clientele and audiences is half of the success of the process of communication. All people are clientele and audiences in communication. However, communication can only be effective when communicators take into consideration the characteristics of the intended clientele and audiences. Characteristics like social position, education level, age range, race and ethnicity, primary language, and job type are worth considering. Number 1 of the characteristics of clientele and audiences of communication is social position. It is the status that a person enjoys in a communication context. One may be a president or leader, middle manager, a teacher, or a student in their community. These social positions dictate how one gets communicated to and how that communication has to be created, packaged, contained, and delivered. Second, education level. It may suggest that reading skill and healthy literacy and the ability to engage with more complex topics. An audience that has limited knowledge may find it difficult to use written materials with such an audience, oral presentations may be more effective. Third, age range. It can affect choice of communication format or distribution. The communication material may be relevant to people of all ages, but the age of the audience may affect the communication format, even channels. A group of elementary pupils may find it difficult to understand a topic about complex issues like same-sex marriages in the Philippines. Teenagers may find it boring if one talks about retirement to them. Thus, knowing the age range is important in talking to an individual. Fourth, race and ethnicity. It is an important consideration in communication, particularly in deciding on graphics, topics, and photos. It is important to design a talk and the graphics and photos that are sensitive to the race and ethnicity of the audience to prevent a discriminatory speeches and materials. Fifth, of the characteristics of clienteles and audiences of communication is primary language. It has to be considered if the message is to be effective, if the language used is different from the one used and understood by the target audience, then there is a difficulty in the process of communication. Number 6 is job type. This kind of information about the clientele or audience can affect the format of the report or speech. Access to the information and materials may be limited if the client or audience belongs to the marginalized group. As established, there are various types of clientele and audiences in communication, with various characteristics. The effectiveness and success of communication may vary depending on the knowledge of the speaker of his or her clientele and/or audience. In this part of the lesson, you will be informed about the different types of audiences and the things needed upon engaging with them. My dear students, before we continue with our lesson, I would just like to know if you have some questions. If you have some questions, please write them in the chat box so I will read and answer them. Okay, so now we're going to continue with the different types of audiences. The first type of audience is the neutral audience. This refers to people who are directly or indirectly interested or don't want to invest in the ideas or message. They may be some of the crowd as part of the audience attending a conference or a convention. They may be passers-by hearing the demonstration of a vendor. Number 2, hostile audiences. These are the people who are strong in disagreement with the idea or message. They may be the opposing group between a dialogue, a person who finds it difficult to favor a plan. Number 3 is uninformed audiences. These are people who are unfamiliar with the topic of the discussion that is taking place at the moment. Example, they may be the ABM students attending a seminar about poetry. They may be some UMS and GAS students attending a workshop about accounting, or TVL learners attending science research conferences, or STEM students listening to the instruction of a massage therapist. Number 4 is business audiences. They usually do not have the patience to sit through the speaker's storytelling. Therefore, for this group, it is advisable to keep the message short. The need to be polite and concise is essential to this type. It is important to emphasize that the message is for them. My dear students, we are already done with lesson 6 and we are already at our last lesson for this quarter. I hope you are still excited to listen to this discussion as I am still excited to discuss this lesson for you. The first topic for lesson 7 are the needs of various types of clientele and audiences of communication. And without further ado, this is the first one, the individual as client of communication. As an individual, you want to be the first to know about all matters that pertain to you. The need of an individual depends on his or her wants and desires, as well as depends on the situation. Second, the group and organization as client of communication. Groups and organizations tend to have communication needs that are specific to them. That is why, before communicating or talking to a certain group of people, you have to know their needs so that your message will become relevant to them. Number 3, the community as client of communication. When a community is the client of communication, the message has to be responsive to the need and the channel has to be appropriate and the subject to be communicated has to be relevant to the community. After knowing the 3 groups, the individual as a client of communication, the group or organization as a client of communication, and the community as a client of communication, now we're going to discuss the needed information about the audience. First, their background information about the topic. We have to know whether the audience have any idea about what you're talking about, so that you're going to adjust your discussion depending on the information that they already know of what you're going to discuss. And the second is their demographic factors such as age, gender, education, income, class, marital status, number of children, home ownership, and location. These are also important factors when talking to people. Third is their personality type, whether they are introvert or extrovert. And then the fourth, their attitudes, values, and beliefs. Fifth, their past experiences and behavior. My dear student, this is already the last lesson for the second quarter, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank you and congratulate you for finishing the first semester. Although we still have our exam, but still I'm so proud of you. And if you learned something from me, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.